Hi there, everyone. Michael A. Bryan from the Oraculos School of Astrology, and welcome to Mychal Fix My Stars, my new astrology hotline where I help real people troubleshoot real challenges that they face within their lives using the wisdom of astrology.
I am wondering about um, the potential for me to have a career in astrology, given that I experience a lot of social anxiety in dealing with people, and I've never found a satisfactory career, and I'm getting kind of old, so I'm just wondering if you see any kind of future like that for me. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I've been getting this question come up so much within my horary astrology client population, as well as within my natal astrology client population, where more and more people are asking this question: will I be a good astrologer? Is astrology the right career path for me? Should I be doing astrology? And I find that very interesting because 5 years ago, that wasn't necessarily the question. So I think it's just always interesting to notice how different questions come up within different eras of time. There was a moment when divorce was the question that came up every week. And not saying that divorce questions have lessened substantially, but they have lessened substantially because now the question of am I going to be an astrologer? Can I make it as an astrologer has really become a very large question that's present within the hearts of many people. So, the good news within this chart is that the initial answer seems to be yes. And I'll explain why that is. But before I explain why that is, I think it's useful to take a look at some of the things going on within this chart so that we can see some of the things that the caller already expressed as being part and parcel of her understanding of herself. First of all, she has the rule of the ascendant in the 12th house. Back in the day, not too long ago, probably a month ago, I would have gone into a whole spiel about interpreting the sign on the cusp of the ascendant. However, I'm canceling that completely out of my astrological practice because I want to set a good example for my students. And so I'm trying to move my entire astrological community away from talking about the signs of the zodiac in general. So I will not be interpreting the sign on the cusp of this ascendant because I hope that all of my students who are within the sound of my voice will also follow suit and cease and desist from talking about the signs of the zodiac within their astrological practice forevermore, no matter what I taught before. Anyway, so the point of the matter is we have the moon here within the 12th house. Having the ruler of the ascendant in the 12th house can oftentimes feel as if that person is living within this world without skin. It can oftentimes feel as if that person is having to navigate the world around them without a fundamental level of protection that other people seem to have. When we have the rule of our ascendant in the 12th house, it can make us feel a little bit more vulnerable to the onslaught of life, and it can also make us feel extraordinarily sensitive as we try to navigate our way through the world around us. And that sensitivity can be wonderful from the perspective of us entering a spiritual field as a particular career path, or from the perspective of us entering a helping field or an altruistic field or a volunteering field from the perspective of a potential career path, but it doesn't necessarily bode well in terms of us ourselves feeling fundamentally protected within this world. So, very often, when a person is being born into this life with the rule of their ascendant in the 12th house, there can be a fundamental sense of a lack of protection or a fundamental sense of a lack of security within their physical embodiment. And so, that's something that we want to be mindful of because even though this native does not have Leo rising, if this native had Leo rising with the sun in Cancer in the 12th house, then this person would never manifest within their lives as a quote unquote stereotypical Leo because that would be beyond the scope of what their chart actually allows. Because you can't be Leo and in the 12th house at the same time, those two things contradict each other. And I won't be telling anybody what it means to be a Leo because we're no longer talking about signs of the zodiac at Oraculos, so help me God. So the reality is that we already see this fundamental feeling of a sensitivity stepping into this world, which is wonderful for psychic work. And it's wonderful for work in which we have to work with people at a very deep level and at a level where words are seldom spoken. And so Reiki as a healing practice, one, I love Reiki in general, but I think that Reiki as a healing practice can be an area where that occurs. I feel as if hypnosis as a healing practice could be something else for people who have the rule of the ascendant in the 12th house and they're naturally gravitating towards more spiritual lines of work. I'm not just saying this because of the 12th house. You must know, if you've seen me do any sort of astrology for any length of time, that we don't base an entire interpretation just on one chart factor being in one house. It is the most ridiculous thing to do because anything we're going to say as astrologers has to be built on multiple factors. The multiple factors we see here is that she has the moon in the 12th house in an opposition with Neptune in the 6th house, and she also has the sun in a conjunction with that Neptune. Now, if this native has brothers, for example. And the reason I say brothers is because very often when we have the sun on the third house cusp, we end up having one sibling, and that sibling ends up being a brother. I would ask this native if she has a brother who is battling with alcoholism as a potential addiction of his, or if he's battling with any other mental health issues that he has to take medication for, and if that medication is possibly having an adverse effect on his constitution in general. That would be something I would ask just based on having the ruler of the third house in the conjunction with Neptune and both of them being mutable. Very often, when a person has not just a sibling mutable, but very often when a person has oy vey, and I don't like this language because I'm going to say when a person has a very mutable chart, but I don't really want to plant that seed because it's the wrong seed and it's the wrong takeaway. But I'll say it anyway. Very often, when a person has a very mutable situation going on within their chart, and if those things are also afflicted on top of that, it can create a scenario within that person's life where there does feel to be this split as they move through the world. All of the mutable signs are considered to be double bodied signs. Double bodied because all of the mutable signs occur in pairs. We have the twins in Gemini. We have Virgo, who seems to be half woman, half earth, because she's holding the sheath of wheat within her hands. We also have Sagittarius, who is half man, half horse, and we also have the two fish in Pisces. So there's this feeling when we're mutable that we already have one foot in, one foot out to begin with. And that can create a very great sense of anxiety within a person's life, especially if their mutable ascendant ruler is afflicted by other things within their chart. And she has her mutable ascendant ruler being the moon in Gemini, afflicted by being in the 12th house, afflicted by being conjunct the south node, afflicted by being opposite Neptune. All of these things are actually also very tricky from a medical astrology perspective because when we have this sort of combination going on within the chart, this can oftentimes point towards an autoimmune issue occurring within this person's life earlier on within the life. As you all know, I like to place people's issues safely in their past because I don't really like to speak into people's future unless we're doing a predictive chart reading, in which case, sure, I'll talk about your future. But when we're talking about natal astrology and things that are potentially challenging or problematic within the natal astrological context, I like to place those problems in the past so that it doesn't feel as if I'm projecting them into the future. So what we see with this is that this oftentimes shows up within the charts of people who have very specific health issues that can oftentimes have to do with an autoimmune response, or they can have very specific autoimmune issues that end up having more of a global impact on their entire bodies and their entire constitution. And therefore, it's kind of impossible to really pinpoint what the issue is because everything seems to be the issue because as a result of the Neptune contact, whatever is occurring within this native's life could be so nebulous and so widespread that it's impossible to say, I'm going to take a pill to fix this thing or I'm going to take a pill to fix this other thing, because there's a sense of having this decentralized thing that I just have to live with and that I just have to deal with. When we have the rule of the ascendant in the 12th house, it can oftentimes also represent having to deal with a chronic health issue that's just a part of my life in general. One of the things, or one of the ways how this tends to manifest that I've seen, is this can manifest as Lyme disease. And once again, we're talking about something that we're safely placing in the past of this native. We're not projecting this into her future. So Lyme disease can be one of the ways how this manifests. And that does tend to have a global impact on the body of that person. It creates a greater pain sensitivity, it creates brain fog, there's a digestive repercussion, there can also be arthritis like issues that occur specifically within the neck of that person. So there are many ways how that can manifest that ends up causing it to be a global sort of thing within the person's constitution. The point of saying all of this is that when you find yourself navigating a very precarious life in a very precarious body, it can also create a sense of feeling as if we need to be a little bit more protected and a little bit more guarded from the ravages of the world around us. And that can create a very real level of anxiety or even potentially a fear within the heart of that person, because the question becomes, I know the sort of things I need in order to move safely within the world, but do other people know the sort of things I need in order to really sustain my well being within the world? And very often, when we have the sort of peculiar or very specific issues that might arise out of having a chart like this, no one else really gets it in the same way that we get it. And as a result of that, that could cause us to not necessarily feel as if we can interact with people in a very deep sort of way. So, all of that being said, we have a very real reason for, and not saying that we needed a reason, but all of that being said, we see very real evidence of the reality of where some of that anxiety could come from in terms of social interaction. However, moving on to talking about the astrology itself, this native has the ruler of the ninth house in the first house. Good news, that is one of the astrologer's signatures. Having the ruler of the ninth house in the first house is an astrological signature. Having the ruler of the first house in the ninth house is also an astrological signature. We love to see it. And so this could be an indication that the native is meant to pursue some spiritual path within her life, of which we know astrology is definitely one of them. Another indication of a person's astrological prowess within this lifetime is an assessment of the third triplicity ruler of the ninth house cusp. The third triplicity ruler of her ninth house cusp is Jupiter at 9 degrees of Pisces, 9 minutes in her 10th house, which is the clearest indication ever that this person is here within this lifetime as a means to manifest a ninth house occupation as her primary occupation. The issue with having Jupiter not only as the third triplicity ruler of her ninth house cusp, but also as the specific ruler of her 10th house, is because Jupiter is also mutable. Very often, when we have the ruler of our 10th house in a mutable sign or in a double bodied sign, it creates this sense of us manifesting our career in two distinctly different ways. So, this is the person who could be very good at one thing, but also very good at something else, and who may need to find a way how to reconcile those things that she's good at in order to do them in a more cohesive way in the world at large. The problem with also having a Jupiter as good as she has within her chart is because it creates a vacuum of infinite possibility. When we have this type of Jupiter ruling our 10th house, it feels as if our mind is constantly roaming with all of the possibilities of what we could possibly do, because we know that we can be so good at doing so many things. And as a result of that, that could cause a sort of analysis paralysis, which prevents us from actually pursuing any of the things that we constantly find ourselves fantasizing about within our minds because we don't actually know how to move ourselves specifically in any one of those directions. Jupiter is a wonderful planet. Jupiter can also be an awful planet. And what's awful about Jupiter is that Jupiter can oftentimes create so many possibilities within our lives that it becomes actively impossible for us to choose. And that might sound like a very first world problem. It might be a very first world problem, but it doesn't change the fact that having too many options is just as bad as having no options at all. So within the life of this native, she might have to find a way to reel her own self in and force herself to only do one thing. And that could be a bit of a challenge, especially when she has the sort of imaginative capacity as she has that allows her to envision all of the things that she can do. Reeling herself in and forcing herself to do just one thing may be a tall order to ask. So that's something that we want to be mindful of within the context of this chart reading as well. And I think the last thing that I want to say in this is she has the ruler of the 10th house in a square relationship with the ruler of her first house. And she said to us that for her, she's never really been able to land within the shape of a career that has felt like her forever career. She has the rule of the 10th house in a square relationship with the rule of the first house. And as we know, the square is a warlike relationship. So even though her career possibility and promise within this lifetime looks very, very good, we do also see that there is a tension based relationship between her and her career in general. And that tension based relationship could be because there is this constant machine of creating possibilities within her that might cause her to consistently want to do something else or try something else or root herself in another experience or find someplace else to place her conscious awareness and ability. However, within a chart like this, we need that person to choose just one thing. Because in choosing just one thing, she'll find far more bang for her buck because she does also have the concentrative ability to go down a particular path due to the fact that she has the Mercury in the conjunction with Mars. So she does have the concentrative ability to do just one thing. The larger question is she going to force herself into the shape of that? Because that can be a little bit of a challenge. One of the things that happens when we have a chart like this and we try to force ourselves into the box of just doing one thing is that it creates even greater stress and anxiety within our lives because we then feel as if we're missing out on opportunities. And that stress and that anxiety can become blinding for a person. On the note of blinding and eyesight in general, she has the opposition of the sun and the moon, and they both being in the conjunction with the Neptune. And this is something that we sometimes see within the charts of people who have various eye issues, and those eye issues can range from glaucoma to cataract or anything that potentially has the ability to weaken a person's eyesight. But a part of that, and I dare say historically, that weakening of one way of seeing has oftentimes been a way of opening up a whole new way of seeing on an intuitive and on a psychic and on an imaginative level. So that could be something that she has finally developed. She may have learned how to develop the ability to create worlds within her mind as a result of some of the other ways that she has felt inhibited within life in general. However, the largest takeaway from this that we want to be mindful of within this chart is that the ruler of her sixth house is also the ruler of her 10th house, which can be an indication that the theme of career in general within her life is a point of stress, and it is also a massive point of growth. And if she can allow herself to, one, choose one thing and force herself to take her practiced powers and charge them in the direction of that one thing, she actually stands to manifest a very wonderful career for herself within this lifetime. And having the Jupiter in the state that it's in as the third triplicity ruler of the ninth house, I wish I had Jupiter as the third triplicity ruler of my ninth house in Pisces in the 10th house. since she has this Jupiter in the way that she has it, she actually also does have the natal promise of manifesting a very successful life in this lifetime as an astrologer, if that's something that she chooses to do. However, the biggest thing that she has to do at this moment is make a decision, because more than doers, we are deciders. And once the decision becomes clear, the doing becomes effortless.
Oh, wow, that was amazing. Thank you, Mychal.
You're very welcome.
I'll just say yes, I do have one brother, and yes, he experienced mental issues all throughout when I was growing up. I have been diagnosed with thyroiditis, and experience ongoing autoimmune issues that they can't figure out. And I do have poor eyesight, and my eyes swell up every time I get stressed. But I have a very strong imagination, that's for sure. And this has really helped me. This has come at a really critical time for me, because this is the first time in my life I've found something that I really, really want to do. And I just don't want to get waylaid by the stress that happens every time I think about it. But I feel like I can be good at it. And I think you've shown me that I do have that potential within me. So thank you.
Awesome. You're very, very welcome. Another thing I'll say on the note of the thyroiditis is that very often when there is a Neptune story involved within a person's thyroid story, it oftentimes manifests as an underfunctioning thyroid. So that can manifest as a Hashimoto's thyroiditis or a hypothyroidism. So I just want to check in with you and find out whether or not that's manifesting as more of a hypothyroidism as opposed to a hyperthyroidism.
Yes, hypothyroidism. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. As a medical astrology aside, whenever we're speaking about the underfunctioning of something, Saturn and Neptune will represent an underfunctioning, whereas Mars and Uranus, for example, will represent an overfunctioning. And so seeing the strong influence of the Neptune within this chart, not just with her sun, but also with the moon and with the Saturn in the first house, points more in the direction of an underfunctioning within the body or an increase of cold within the body in general, which coldness is one of the, I'm pretty sure that having cold extremities is one of the symptoms of having a hypothyroidism as well. And can you just confirm that for me, HT, if that's the truth?
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your chart with us, and I wish you
Thank you.
all the best in your astrological
Thank you.
endeavors. You're welcome.
Okay.
If you've enjoyed today's show, then please remember to hit subscribe down below. I'm currently on a mission to get 12,000 subscribers across all platforms, which includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify by the end of November 2023. And it's a tall order, but I'm pretty sure we can do it because we make some really good astrological content here on the Oraculos Podcast. So please remember to hit subscribe down below, hit the notification bell so that you receive notifications of when we come out with these episodes on a daily basis. And please share the Oraculos Podcast with your other astrologically minded friends so that more and more people can know about the amazing work that we're doing over here on the Oraculos Podcast.